Good evening, everyone. I am Rabbi Ron Stern from Stephen Wise Temple and also your tech administrator for the evening. So sorry if I'm doing double duty. It's my pleasure to kick off our next program in the series, in the Bradley Sonnenberg Wellness Series. We're doing it almost quarterly as a way of focusing on human resilience and well-being. It's a tribute to Bradley Sonnenberg, sponsored by Andrea and Glenn Sonnenberg in memory of their son Bradley, whose own struggle with mental health really inspires their continuing commitment to strengthening wellness in the broader community. Before I talk about our presenter this evening, Kevin Nahai, I just want to mention that one of Andrea's incredible accomplishments besides the Bradley Sonnenberg Wellness Series is Wise Readers to Leaders, which is getting ready to begin. I think it's 10th season, it's 10th summer of offering reading and scholastic enrichment to children from underserved agencies. We host about 6 weeks worth of learning for about 250 children from across Los Angeles, sponsored in different venues from American Jewish University to Stephen Wise. We'll have a couple of venues downtown this year, and using college level and older teachers and high school volunteers, we provide reading enrichment and free reading enrichment to children, along with summer camp-like experiences for 6 weeks out of their summer, something these kids would not have were it not for our program, all free of charge. Fundraising is accomplished by Andrea and our staff, and also through the grants from many foundations. It's quite a remarkable program, but I just wanted to share that, and it exists really because of Andrea's hard work and efforts to make it exist. And we are grateful to the Sonnenberg family and to Andrea especially for providing this incredible service through WISE to the broader Los Angeles community. With that little advert about Wise Readers to Leaders, I just want to say that I'm happy to share the screen with Kevin Nahai. I'm going to add him to our screen here. Our paths first crossed, Kevin, actually your sister's bat mitzvah, I believe, and then yours. And I was, to be honest with you, immediately impressed with the Nahai family. From your mother, Gina, who is a talented writer of novels and an engaging speaker, to your dad, who's a lawyer and a sometime public servant in his work with the DWP and the city of LA. And he's often someone I turn to for advice when I'm trying to advocate for particular issues in the city. And over the years, our paths, my path and the Nahai family have crossed frequently as David and Gina have willingly shared their talents and expertise with the WISE community. So Kevin is the next generation, and I'm so happy to welcome him. He's a WISE school grad, and I'm welcoming him back to WISE to share his wisdom and insights. Just a little reminder to all of the participants. First and foremost, we are grateful to have you on joining us for this session, and grateful that you are opening your eyes and your ears and your mind to insights from Kevin. I'll invite you to post your questions in the chat. I will collect them and curate them and share them with Kevin after he has finished with his presentation. Before we turn to Kevin, though, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce my talented and treasured colleague, Cantor Emma Lutz, Senior Cantor of Stephen Wise Temple, for some inspirational music. So let me give you the spotlight, Cantor. And
thank you so much, Rabbi.
Sure.
Kevin, I'm so looking forward to tonight's presentation. I've been thinking about it all day. I've had a really busy day and a wonderful day, but it's sort of been like the cherry on top of the cake of this day, and I've been working towards it. And Rabbi Stern, you gave such a beautiful intro to the Sonnenberg Wellness Series, and you mentioned so many of Andrea's wonderful talents, and you forgot that, or maybe you didn't forget, but I'll add that one of her many talents, of course, is being a lover of music and a very, very talented singer and song leader also on our Bima. So Andrea asked me to sort of set the tone for tonight and Kevin's presentation. And I wanted to share a really simple text from our tradition and a very simple and sweet chant. It comes from Psalm 23. I just put it in the chat. There's the Hebrew and a transliteration and the simple translation. This is the text that I go to when I'm feeling anxious, when I am stressed, or when I'm feeling just empty. And when I get that motivation, when I acknowledge those feelings, and then I'm ready to move or start moving to a place of resilience and grit and hope, these are the words that I come to. Psalm 23, just 2 words, kosi revaya. Literally, my cup is full, or I like to think of it as my cup is saturated, or my cup is complete, or some days my cup is adequate, or some days my cup is plentiful, some days it's abounding, and some days it's full, or maybe it's just half full. But it's a really great reminder that we have everything we need within us at all times to connect with God, to connect with ourselves and whatever we're feeling, and also to connect with each other, which I think is really the greatest blessing of tonight. So I'm just going to share a simple chant, and the beauty of being on Zoom is even when we're muted, we can sing together. And if you don't feel like singing, I'll invite you to just sit comfortably in your chair, and you can close your eyes or just listen to Kosi Revaya. Kosi Revaya, Kosi Revaya, Kosi Revaya, Kosi Revaya. Kosi Revaya, 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 Kosi Revaya. Thanks. I could see some of your mouths moving. I can't hear you, which is what I want, but I could see. It's my privilege and my joy and my honor to pass the torch to my friend, Andrea Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Cantor Emma. That was so beautiful and so perfectly fitting for a presentation on this topic of resilience and hope and wellness. So it really inspired me, and I hope it inspired everybody else. I have the great pleasure of formally turning the program over to Kevin Nahai, our speaker, and I met Kevin through the work that I'm doing in the community in the mental health space. And we connected and instantly bonded over our desire to help people feel whole and full and well. And he was on my podcast. I hope that you will listen to it. If you haven't listened to it, Getting Through, he's on our first season. I love his episode and what he shares. So please take a listen to that. He's been on my Instagram live series. He's going to be on my, we're presenting to the UCLA Semel Institute, and he's going to be on that panel with me. And then he's also going to be on a panel at USC with me on a wellness panel. I'm not sure he might even know about that one yet, but I have to invite him to that one. So hopefully I'm going to get him there too. Anyway, he is young but wise, really offers so much in what he knows, his wisdom and his experience, because he's been through so much and a lot of adversity at such a young at such a young age. I have known him during this time in his life where he's a life coach and he's a speaker, but I really understand what he's gone through and what it's taken to get him to this point. So he's going to share that with you. He went to the Brentwood School. He went to Stephen Wise Temple, and like Rabbi Stern said, was bar mitzvahed by Rabbi Stern at Stephen Wise Temple. He actually studied in Hebrew school with my son Jake. So we came to learn that when we connected. So it is my pleasure and my honor to turn the podium over to my friend and colleague and esteemed guest, Kevin Nahai. So,
thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you, Rabbi Stern, for having me. Excuse me, and thank you, Cantor Lutz, for that beautiful song that you sung us. I'm very, very honored to be here, especially because this is the congregation that I was bar mitzvahed in. And Andrea, I can't thank you enough for taking me under your wing and bringing me into your world. So thank you in advance to everybody who is here tonight. I'd like to tell you the story of the last 10 and a half years of my life. Oh, my brother entered the waiting room. Cool. This is the story of August of 2011 until this very moment right here sitting in this chair. It is a story of how I moved from losing complete control over my life and hitting my personal rock bottom to rebuilding slowly and creating order out of chaos and eventually becoming happy and healthy and successful, thank God, and all of the ups and downs in between. This is a story of change and purpose and miracles. It's a success story that was painful and nonlinear. And anybody who tells you that success is easy or linear has never really had it. And this is also a success story in which my definition of success changed many times. I think that success is all about the standards against which we are measuring ourselves. So there was a time in my life where I thought I was a complete and total and utter failure. But that was because I was expecting myself to do impossible things given the circumstances that I was in. It's like expecting a 10-year-old kid to be able to dunk on an NBA hoop. If you measure him against that standard, he will fail every time. Today, I feel that I have realistic standards, at least I think so, but who knows if I can be trusted. And today I define success as living a life of personal fulfillment and achievement, peace of mind, and contribution, positive contribution to the lives of others. To me, these are all of the things that constitute an extraordinary life. Success to me is about having a life in which you both want the things you have and have the things you want. And as a matter of fact, it works in that order. If we're serious about having the things that we want, we better first become serious about wanting the things that we have. And today, by the grace of God, I can confidently say that I have an extraordinary life. But let me tell you how I got here. In August of 2011, at the age of 19, I entered my first semester of college at USC as a freshman. I was a very happy-go-lucky, bright-eyed, jovial, sociable, outgoing kid. I had a great high school experience overall, and I had friends, and I was apprehensive like anyone about entering college, but I was excited for all of the opportunities that lay ahead of me. And then things took a turn. 6 weeks later, September 24th, 2011, a mentor I had in high school who was a Brentwood parent named Michael Marquez came down to USC to have lunch with me. He was also a USC grad, and he came down to the campus to have lunch with me and see how I was doing. We were eating at a cafe on campus called Seeds, and I told him, Michael, pardon me for a second, I have to run to the restroom. For the first time in my life that day, I sat down to use the restroom and I bled profusely for at least 30 minutes. I was sweating and I was in excruciating pain I had never experienced. and my anxiety went through the roof. I had no idea what was going on. And Michael, after 30 minutes, called me to see if I was okay. So, like a light switch, I composed myself, I went back, and I finished our lunch. And I spent the next 8 hours of that Saturday running to and from the restroom, having bleeding. Again and again, I was terrified, no clue what was happening. But I was thinking I must have just eaten something bad and it was going to pass. This continued for 2 weeks, and I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my parents, I didn't tell my friends. And I know what you're thinking, you're crazy. You know, how could you not tell anybody about this bleeding and this pain and these issues you were having for 2 whole weeks? And you're right, it was a mistake. But I was terrified and I was in denial. And I also, being a college freshman, had an independence complex where I thought that if I told my parents about this, they would rightfully make me move back home, and I would lose my freedom and my independence, and I would regress into being a high school kid who had to be mothered. And that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I hid it from everyone, and it was a bad move, and I regret it. Finally, after 2 weeks, I told my parents, and they took me to our family gastroenterologist. It was a Sunday. He was kind enough to come in on a Sunday. It was October 9th, 2011. And that was the day that our family gastroenterologist diagnosed me with ulcerative colitis, which is a rare, incurable condition of the stomach. It is an autoimmune disease, very similar to Crohn's disease, that disproportionately affects Jews. So Jews have a lot of benefits, one of them being our intelligence and our ability to accomplish things in our family. But, we have a lot of anxiety, and we have disproportionately high numbers of Crohn's and colitis. That day, October 9th, 2011, that I got the diagnosis, it changed everything for me. I was devastated. I was confused. I felt like my body had betrayed me. And I was always such an optimistic, jovial person who could see the silver lining in everything. I was always lifting up other people. I was always looking on the bright side. But on this particular day, I remember feeling hopeless and feeling not like myself. Over the course of the next few months, I started losing weight very, very rapidly. I no longer recognized myself when I looked in the mirror, and I had no idea how or if I was going to fix this. My freshman year, I was hospitalized 6 times due to fatigue, dehydration, and loss of blood. There were about 4 or 5 foods that I could actually digest without throwing up or being in terrible discomfort. So I started to associate food with pain. And when you lose complete control over your life in a flash, you will find something you can control. They say that the strongest human instinct is the instinct for self-preservation and self-protection. But I don't think that's true. In my experience, the strongest human instincts are for familiarity and safety, order, and control. And I lost all of that. So the way that I started to assert a semblance of control in my life was by isolating from my friends, isolating from my family, and studying all day, all night, alone in the library. Anybody who knows me will tell you that I am about as social as a golden retriever, and isolation does not work for me. I also imposed a semblance of control over my own life by becoming obsessive about what I would eat. Again, because my mind had created an association between food and pain. And anybody who knows me will tell you that I love to eat and I really know how to put food back. So starvation also does not work for me. By the end of my freshman year, I weighed 112 pounds. I'm 185 now. So if you can imagine me 70 pounds lighter, it wasn't very long before the trauma of all of this turned into full-blown anorexia, very severe anxiety, and a very deep and debilitating depression. I would stay in my room, my dorm, for entire weekends at a time, 36, 48 hours, lying to my family and my friends about where I was and what I was doing. I remember that some weekends or holidays, I would go home and spend time with my family, and I would pretend to be okay, and I would pretend to enjoy myself. But on the drive back to my dorm at USC from my parents' house, I would cry my eyes out in the car. I would sob the whole way to the dorm. And then when I got to the dorm, like a light switch, I would compose myself and I would say, okay, you're okay. And I would suppress and suppress and suppress. And what we know about autoimmune disorders now, Western medicine doctors are learning this increasingly, is that autoimmune disorders are usually the result of emotional injury that has been pushed down and unresolved. And so while I was battling this physical ailment, I was exacerbating it by pushing all of my feelings down and not actually dealing with them. Every morning for breakfast, I would have 1 sliced banana or 6 chunks of pineapple. For lunch, I would have 1 plain chicken breast and 12 almonds exactly. And for dinner, I would have 1 green apple. I used to spend 20 minutes examining all of the apples, comparing them against each other so that I could choose the perfect one that wasn't too large and wasn't too small. This is how messed up my mind was. Because I knew that that apple was all that I was going to eat that night. So for 11 months straight, I ate like that, fewer than 600 calories a day. And I went to bed starving, alone, and depressed every night. That is the sob story. So now let's talk about how it got better. And of course, I truncated all of that. But I hope I was able to convey the depth of my depression and my despair. And when I think about myself being in those situations, I wish I could go back and hug that kid and tell him that I am so, so sorry for putting him through that. But things started to take a turn for the better. In the summer, between my freshman and sophomore years of college, when I was really, really at my lowest point, I went to the beach with my friend from high school. To preserve his anonymity, I'll call him Sam. Sam confided in me at the beach that day that when he was a child in elementary school, he had also dealt with anorexia and depression and anxiety. And Sam gave me the phone number of a nutrition therapist who he said had changed his life. He was paying it forward to me that day by changing my life. And Sam is one of the reasons that I have always and will always believe that people are the best thing that can happen to anybody. Sam also taught me that anger and pressure and self-flagellation never work. Self-hatred only begets more self-hatred. I have a client now, she's 24 and she's dealing with the things that I dealt with 10 years ago. And she says to me, she wants me to be mean to her. She wants me to be tough on her. She wants me to pressure her. Those are the things that I would have said. But I won't do it because now I know that those things don't work. Only love works. And love is the byproduct of giving. Sam showed me unconditional love that day by giving to me, by saying to me, hey man, I don't know exactly what you're dealing with, but maybe this could help you. And if you don't want to do it, that's okay. I love you anyway. Thank God I decided to listen to Sam I started seeing the nutrition therapist and things started to get better. It was, again, not linear. My colitis was nowhere near in remission at that point, but I was making slow progress with the depression and the anorexia. This continued throughout my remaining years of college. I got a new therapist who helped me tremendously in a bunch of different areas. But my senior year, I fell back into old habits and a very bad depression, and my senior year of college, and I had to take an entire semester off of school. I worked at a restaurant and pretty much did nothing other than that so that I could focus on going to therapy, exercising, and getting my mental health in order. And at the time, I thought that I was basically flunking out of college and I was a complete failure. But this ended up being one of the best decisions that I ever made. Ups and downs. You know, just because you get one flat tire does not mean that you get out of the car and slash the other 3. So by the time I was 23 years old, I graduated college. And at this point, I was doing okay in terms of my mental health, but now I had to confront the fact that I had no direction. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And I had very, very little confidence. I had been in therapy at this point for 5 years straight, and I did not feel like I had much to show for it. And that's when I realized that while therapy is enormously helpful in many ways and changed my life for the better, talking about your problems over and over again doesn't actually accomplish much unless you begin living your life differently along with it. And that was the turning point for me, is when I had this realization that I had to take responsibility not only for my problems, but for the ways in which I was living my life as a result of those problems. So at the age of 23, 24, or 25, was I meditating? No. Was I praying? No. Did I have a good community of like-minded friends? No. Did I have a spiritual connection to Judaism? No. Was I taking action in the direction of my dreams? No. So no wonder I had such low confidence and no direction. I had no credibility with myself, and I hadn't built my reputation with myself. After a very, very influential conversation with one of my mentors named Mark one night at the gym, I decided to take a chance and just start doing it. I started reading and educating myself. I started reaching out to other mentors and successful business people and ask them how they did it. I started modeling the behaviors of people that I wanted to become like. I learned how to meditate. I exercised every day. I created a daily gratitude practice. I started journaling. I started praying. I started meeting with a rabbi. I started doing all of the little things because they work. And I won't bore you with the details of all of those little things because you know what they are. They're not rocket science. But what I've learned is that the difference between people who are happy and successful and stable and the ones who are not is that the happy and successful and stable people just do the little things every day. They find a system, they find a strategy that works for them, and they execute. Both when they are feeling good and especially when they are feeling bad. I think any psychologist, psychiatrist, or coach worth his or her salt will tell you that if you want to feel better, therapy and medication are essential, but therapy and medication alone are not enough. We have to change our behavior. If there's a way around that, I've never learned it. But what I've seen in my own life and in the lives of my clients is that when we change our behavior, everything else follows. And I understand that it's not easy to practice taking positive actions on a consistent basis when we are stuck in a negative feeling. I've been there. But if we wait to take those actions until we magically feel better or until we feel more motivated, then we might be waiting so long that we die of old age. And so what this means is that action precedes feeling. And because action precedes feeling, you will be amazed at how quickly we feel better when we implement as little as one positive behavior into our daily lives. Every year, every month, every week, I broke it down and I just chose one thing, something that was new and beneficial, no matter how large or small, and I just committed to it. I just started somewhere. And for me, the most effective way to change my life was through changing my habits, because the things that we do over and over again are the things that we become extraordinarily skilled at. You all know people who are the world's best complainer. And how often do they complain? All day, every day. The things we do over and over again, those little habits are what we become expert at. And those are the things that, we don't decide our futures. We decide our habits, and our habits decide our futures. And so while it might be helpful, attending some life-changing seminar or making enormous goals and dreams isn't always necessary. Sometimes it's enough just to make small changes repeatedly every single day with the help and supervision of somebody who has walked the path and has done it. And the biggest misconception about success to me in any area is that you need to make massive changes and huge commitments. And the paradox of success is that we will all be successful if we are willing to set the bar just low enough. And it's not always easy. It requires discipline. As we all know, discipline is doing the thing you said you would do long after the mood you set it in has left you. It can be a painful act, but the more hope you have, the more discipline you will have. For me, the hope of one day being relieved of most of my pain and suffering gave me the courage to endure the discipline in the moment. Today, I am, by the grace of God, the happiest, healthiest, and strongest I have ever been. I love and respect myself at the highest level. I fulfill my calling every day to help other people, and I stick to my commitments. And today I can tell you that if you fulfill your small obligations every single day, you do not have to feel ashamed of your past, and you do not have to be worried about your future. Every morning I wake up and I tell myself, if I fulfill my small obligations and if I live according to my values today, then I do not have to worry about my future, and I do not have to feel ashamed of my past. Today, I have put so much distance between who I am right now in this moment in 2022 and who I used to be, that when I look back on my 19-year-old self, I don't even recognize him. It reminds me of the worm and the apple. A worm stuck inside an apple thinks that the apple is the whole world. But when he finally develops the courage to climb out of the apple and worm his way out, he thinks to himself, this world is enormous, and what the hell was I doing stuck in there for so long? There's so much, there is so much beauty and wonder and abundance and opportunity around us everywhere, all of the time. And so whether it's a bad relationship or an illness or a job or the prison of our own thoughts or any other situation that is no longer helping us, we have a choice not to stay stuck inside the apple. One of the things that helped me worm my way out, in addition to changing my habits, was faith. And today I am a man of faith. I'm no expert on God, but I know that I don't get to pick and choose faith in God when it's convenient for me. I don't get to praise him and thank him when things are going well, but then doubt him and blame him when things are going poorly. On the days when God has given me pain and hardship, how easy it is to forget that it was on that very same day that he gave me life. He gave me food. He gave me water. He gave me wisdom and strength and a beautiful family. He gave me the intellect to understand the pain and the hardship that I'm going through. And if I'm going to praise and thank God when incredible things are happening in my life, like the position that I'm in now, I also have to praise and thank God when terrible and painful things happen in my life. As I said earlier, this is a story of change and purpose and miracles. And today I thank God every single day for the miracle of life. Today I have a life of achievement and fulfillment and peace of mind and contribution. And I got here by doing the little things. I got here by keeping my faith strong, choosing faith over fear. And I got here by making my life 1% better every single day. You string enough of those together, you will have an extraordinary life. And finally, I got here through love for myself, by giving love, and by opening my heart to receiving love. Only love works. Only love works. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thanks, Kevin, for sharing your story and your learnings and yourself really so openly and in a kind of a raw way that allows for a certain kind of exposure and vulnerability that people don't often share with others. So thank you for that. I want to ask you a couple of questions and really just to go a little deeper, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So I'm a rabbi, so I'm going to go to the faith piece.
Okay.
Can you give us a little more about your faith? And what I mean by that is, how do you experience God in your life, and how do you express your faith? Is it through prayer? Is it through ritual? Is there some practice that you do? Is Judaism a part of that? Have you gone to other faiths? How do you experience all those aspects in your own sense of well-being?
Well, I feel like I should be asking you that question, and I feel a little bit, embarrassed talking about that because I'm no rabbi. I'm just a guy who practices a little bit on his own, But I meet with a rabbi every Thursday, which has been very, very helpful. I, around 26, 27, started making a lot more friends in the Jewish community. I pray every day for 5 to 10 minutes. I read spiritual texts by different rabbis and people who've interpreted the Talmud over the years and, have written books. All of this stuff is both very fascinating to me and gives me the feeling that my life is connected to a power that is higher than myself. And I always say that to me, it's no accident that at the time that I was most depressed and had the least confidence and the least strength, I was also an atheist. And I had been bar mitzvahed, and we would go to temple on the high holidays, but I had absolutely no connection to Judaism. It wasn't very important to me. I was dating non-Jewish girls. I was in that sort of state of, why would God do this to me? Or why does God do terrible things to good people? As if like he's out to get me or something like that. So over the years, I've built and fostered and cultivated my conscious contact with God through learning and prayer, and by reinstituting a practice of having Shabbat dinner with my family every Friday. And, this stuff has given me community and it's given me purpose. And I definitely would not be as happy or healthy without it. And the last thing I'll say is, like, when I see people who are atheists or they're agnostic or they don't have faith or they don't have any connection to their religion, I feel that they're leaving money on the table. And that's what I was doing, that there was this gold mine of connection and community and information and understanding and comfort that I never engaged in, and that I was leaving money on the table.
interesting. A lot of folks don't get to that place of seeing that they're leaving money on the table. Would you say it was from a place of really, and I used the word vulnerable before, from a place of vulnerability that brought you there, or from a place of pursuit of, you mentioned values earlier, a pursuit of grounding? What led you to this view that says there's money on the table, I need to grab that money?
So I did not have a come to Jesus moment,
Okay.
or come to Moses moment. My come to Jesus moment was in the gym that night with my mentor, Mark, which I didn't share all the details because, I didn't want to go over time. But basically what he taught me in that conversation was the concept of personal responsibility. And he taught me that although these things may not be your fault, you are 100% accountable for how you deal with them, and nobody is going to clean up the mess for you. And it was from that point forward that I decided, okay, I need to change my habits and I need to change the way that I am living, because the way that I was living, I was acting like a depressed person. I was acting like a person, my actions, were that of a person who doesn't have faith, is depressed, is complaining, is anxious, has lost his positive spirit. So I needed to start taking different actions and behaving in ways that reflected the man that I wanted to be. And so I didn't come to Judaism or to faith out of, being on my knees and saying, God, help me. Maybe I could have been sort of saved if I had done that earlier. I turned to faith and to Judaism as this is a place where people find power here, and they find community, and they find meaning here. So, it was sort of like I made the decision that I was going to start exercising every day and eating well. And I actually became a personal trainer, because that was one of the ways in which I could improve my life. And so eventually I came to Judaism and to faith as one of the pursuits that would improve my life. And, I'm not Orthodox. I don't even keep Shabbat, but it has absolutely improved my life I'm forever indebted. And the crazy thing is that, maybe not crazy to you, Rabbi Stern, but the revelation that I had was there was a year where I read 100 books in a year, one book every 3 days. And all of them were on the subject of the brain, the body, psychology, how we function, the subconscious mind, relationships, everything. And I read 100 books that year. And then about a year later, when I started learning about Judaism and started reading the different interpretations of various rabbis, I realized that everything I read in all of those psychology and self-help books is right here in the Torah. It's just, maybe I was too young to understand it, or I had never really learned it before. So when I say a goldmine of information, they're written differently and they have different applications, of course, in real life. But it was like this knowledge has been out there for thousands and thousands of years. And me as a 25 or 26-year-old reading it for the first time, in like 2017 was just a revelatory experience.
So reading it through the lens of the person you were at the particular time. Interesting. So question posed by someone who's on the call. What advice would you give to parents of young people going through circumstances like yours, where the tendency is to withdraw, the tendency is to pull away, the tendency is to shut out those parents, but they see that their child is troubled? How would you advise a parent?
Well, I don't want to seem disingenuous because I'm not a parent. And I wouldn't want to overstep my bounds by advising a parent as to what to do with their child. But I can only say what my experience was with my parents, and what ended up helping me. And also what didn't work, which is not a knock on my parents at all. It was to no fault of theirs that their approach didn't work. It was because I was in denial and I didn't want to be helped. And basically what I would say is that, I mentioned the story of my friend Sam, how he didn't approach me through anger or through hatred or through pressure, because anger, hatred, and pressure just beget more anger, hatred, and pressure. And so when a parent is worried about their child and they're seeing their child suffer, their tendency is to say, please, what can I do to help you? I see that you're in pain. Let us in. Let us help you. We are here. My parents would beg and implore me to open up to them. They would implore me to get help. They would implore me to eat. They would implore me to come home, and I wouldn't, because I was just so stubborn that I was going to do it on my own, which is insane. It's like if you were drowning in the ocean and I threw you a lifeline, I threw you an inflatable life jacket. Would you say, no, I'm going to do this on my own? But that is the mentality of somebody who is addicted or mentally ill or dealing with a severe eating disorder or something like that. The mentality is push everybody away, and I'm going to do it by myself, and I don't need everyone. I don't need anybody. And you slip further and further into isolation, and you ostracize you alienate the people that love you. The problem is that you do that more and more, the more you sense that people are disappointed in you, and the more you sense that you are letting them down. So the approach that I take with my clients now and with friends who I've seen going down a really bad path is the approach of, hey, I'm here. If you need something, you want to talk about it, I'm here to listen and help. If not, I love you anyway. And no worries. We don't have to talk about it. I'm not going to put any pressure on you. And I cannot imagine how incredibly painful that is for a parent, which is why I want to be careful about giving this advice. My parents and my brother and sister really suffered watching me suffer and having no ability, getting nowhere with trying to help me. And I feel terrible, and I've apologized to them over the years for putting them through that kind of pain. But I couldn't be helped until I wanted to be helped. And actually, one of the turning points when I wanted to be helped was my older sister, Ashley, who you mentioned earlier, Rabbi Stern. In May, at the end of my freshman year, when I was really at my lowest point, she took me on a trip to Palm Springs. And during that trip, she didn't tell me what to eat. She didn't tell me she was worried about me. She was just treating it like we were friends, And during my freshman year, she used to take me to frozen yogurt. Once in a while, I would not eat for like 4 days, and then I would have some frozen yogurt. And she just treated me, even though she was extremely concerned about me. And there were times where, she pressured me and got frustrated with me. On those rare occasions, she just treated me like I was normal. And finally, on that trip to Palm Springs, I finally opened up to her and told her that what I'm going through is not okay. And I finally asked her for help. And I think it was because she had treated me like I was normal. She didn't treat me like she was disappointed in me, or I was a frustration, or she was worried about me, or, she didn't pressure me with that kind of stuff. And eventually I became ready. But, I can't imagine the pain that parents have to suffer through when they are watching their child suffer and they can do virtually nothing about it.
So it sounds like you're talking about sort of a non-anxious presence that says, I love you, I accept you, but I'm not going to impose a level of anxiety on you that's going to maybe even exacerbate your own, whatever is going on for yourself.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
talk a little about
that's what worked for me and what has worked when I've taken that approach with my clients.
Got it. Talk a little about your own professional practice. You mentioned it, but I don't know that we actually said what you did, and maybe you can describe a little bit more to us about what it is that you do and what circumstances bring people to you, and then how do you work with them? How do you help them move forward from where they are to where they think they need to be?
Sure.
Or you think they need to be?
Sure. So I work on, so I'm a coach and I work on 5 areas.
By coach, you don't mean soccer, you mean life coach, right?
I wish I was a soccer coach, but yeah.
So I mean, you would call yourself a life coach.
I think that term is pretentious.
Okay.
I call myself a personal coach because there hasn't been a better term invented. I can't really say I'm a life coach because I don't know everything about life,
Right.
but I do know about the 4 or 5 areas that I work on with people. And those are figuring out what you want to do with your career, because I had no direction and I figured that out. Learning how to have happy and healthy and stable relationships, learning how to communicate with your partner, because I had a lot of codependency and abandonment trauma and issues that I didn't talk about in this, but I had to, come a long way in the area of dating and relationships. The third is working with people who've had eating disorders. There's a certain level where it's too severe, like if they need to go to eating disorder treatment, then I wouldn't be able to help them. But if they have a disordered relationship to food or to their body, then I would definitely be the right person to help them. The fourth area is dealing with anxiety, managing their anxiety, and practical ways to do that. And the fifth area is dealing with their self-esteem and their confidence, and helping them sort of increase their belief in themselves. So these 5 areas are the areas in which I suffered the most in my life and where I had to go to hell and back. And they're the areas where, I figured it out more or less. I'm not perfect in these 5 areas. Of course, I still have work to do. I work with a therapist. I work with a coach. I'm still working on my own stuff. But what I learned about these 5 areas is that every single person in their 20s and 30s deals with one of these things, if not all of them. Every single person in their 20s and 30s has trouble figuring out what they want to do with their lives, or trouble in their romantic lives, or trouble with their anxiety, or so forth and so on. And so while we are supposed to be at the pinnacle of our lives, and while we're supposed to be spending our 20s setting ourselves up to have healthy and happy families and careers in our 30s, instead we're battling these demons, and it's universal. And when you ask people for the answer, well, what should I do about it? I have a very sophisticated awareness of what's going on, but what do I do about it? Then you hear crickets. And that was the problem that I kept running into over and over again, that when I asked, what do I do about it? I was often met with the response that, life is a journey and it takes time and it will get better. But that wasn't enough for me. So I set out on a journey to answer those questions. What do I do? And apply them to my own life. And my mission was, okay, if I apply these tactics and these tools and practical skills to my life and they work, then I'm going to start teaching them to other people. And that's exactly what I've done. So now people come to me. My ideal candidate is somebody who has spent some time in therapy and done the foundational work of understanding how they got to where they are and how their problems function. And then I sort of step in and take them from where they are now to where they would like to be in a very practical, structured, and guided way.
So it sounds like, whereas someone who goes through traditional training and therapy, one of their goals is to be relatively neutral for the client, which is to say they don't share their personal story. They don't share their personal journey. They don't, right? Whereas you kind of come at it and say, no, I'm going to lead with that, in that I'm going to share my own experience and my own journey and what I learned, how I changed, how I felt myself grow to the place I wanted to be. And by almost setting yourself up as a role model or an exemplar, you hope to provide them with certain tools. Is that a way to frame it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that would be a really complimentary and kind way to frame it. I don't tell them, hey, I'm going to be your role model or your exemplar, but I really appreciate the compliment.
Well,
But
what I mean by that, I don't want, I don't want you to think that I was, intending it to be necessarily saying you were setting yourself over them, but you're just saying, I'm going to share my life with you.
yeah,
And if what I've learned through my life has meaning for you, then you'll find it useful.
yes,
Right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I never tell people what to do, but I help them figure out what they feel is right in their own heart. And then I push them to do that. Then I hold them accountable to that. And if they say to me, what should I do about something? I will say, it seems like here are the options. Which one feels right to you? And then we're going to do it together. And if they ask me for advice, I'm going to give them the advice. I'm not going to tell them that you have to do it. You have to listen to my advice. Otherwise, you'll be disowned from our relationship or anything like that. But yes, it's much more direct and, structured and guided than traditional therapy would be. And that's not for any particular reason other than the fact that was what made me, that was my passion. That's where my interest lay. So, it wasn't a knock on therapy. I love therapy. I'm a huge proponent of it. I just wanted to serve a different need.
Let me ask you just one last question. You talked about living according to values.
Oh, yes.
And here's what this 60-year-old knows about living a life according to values. And that is that in our lives, we encounter situations where our values are often tested. It's one thing to say, I'm going to live my life according to values, and you can even list your values. But then when you find yourself out in the real world, it's easy to compromise them, or you can justify them, or you can say, well, just this once, I'm going to make this exception. How do you stay true to your values when you encounter situations that are complex and where you might see your values being compromised, risk being compromised?
So you want to know like the little tool that I use?
Sure. Or the tools, or
Okay.
what's the internal dialogue you have with yourself? Or look, we all slip up on our values. That's why the world the Jewish people invented Yom Kippur, right? So, but when you do that, how do you get yourself back on track, or how do you keep yourself from going off track if you feel yourself tending in that direction?
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know if I should, talk about sticking to your values conceptually or actually in the practical sense.
Practical sense, absolutely.
Yeah. So in the practical sense, I've got a couple of tools. First of all, I borrowed something from our friends, Christians. They have a daily devotional that they read from their Bible. And I decided to write a devotional for myself. My devotional consists of about 6 or 7 sentences of the values that I want to uphold every day and the type of man that I want to be. I memorized my devotional and I say it to myself out loud a few times a day. And it is, there's something in psychology called pointing and calling. And basically pointing and calling occurs when, let's say you're on a diet and you reach for a donut. If you stop and you grab the donut and you say, I want to eat this donut right now, but I don't really want to eat this donut because I know it's not going to help me, then you have just called out that scenario and it's going to help you prevent yourself from eating the donut. So I use my devotional as a point and call. If I notice myself slipping off track or doing something that I don't want to be doing, then I will recite my devotional to myself, and it will sort of, it's like if you're driving on the freeway and you sort of start to verge into the wrong lane, you just correct it back, and I often do that if I'm losing my temper, or if I'm being judgmental, or if my ego is getting in the way, or if I'm about to make a regrettable decision in one area or another. My devotional helps me a lot to stay on track. The other thing that I use that has been enormously powerful is I have this concept of my higher self, and I think of it as, a Kevin who is kind like a Kevin who is my angel. who is kind of floating above me. And this is just the way that I conceptualize it in my mind. And when I'm about to make my decision, I ask myself, is this a higher self decision, or is this a base decision? Is this something that my higher self wants me to do? And sometimes I can hear my higher self whispering into my ear, not in a judgmental way, but in a loving way. Hey, you know that that's not the value that you want to live. Let's try something else, you know? And discipline in sticking to your values is really a battle between desires. We have the desire to emulate God and emulate our higher selves. And then we have a base desire to eat the donut, or, you know, to lose your temper, or to be self-righteous, or, you know, to commit adultery, or whatever. So there's this battle between our higher self desires and our base desires. And I always keep my higher self on my left shoulder. And we can be extremely competent at shutting off that higher voice and saying, okay, I'm not listening to you right now. And, you know, then just going for the bacon, literally and figuratively in this case. But, you know, that helps me a lot. And my higher self reminds me, hey, is this decision in line with the man you want to be? And is this decision going to get you farther from or closer to your goals? How will you feel after you make this decision? So just conceiving of that really helps me.
It's almost like being in a powerful state of constant self-reflection.
It is, and not for the purpose of judgment, you know, and not for the purpose of like having Big Brother watching over you, but you know, we're so good at telling our friends, giving our friends good advice and positive affirmations. But when it comes to giving ourselves that, we don't really have that voice in our own heads. So for me, my higher Kevin is that friend from whom I'm receiving that advice and those positive affirmations.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you to you again for telling your story, for opening yourself up to a group of strangers, but also sharing your wisdom and your insights. Thank you to my beloved colleague, Cantor Emma Lutz, for being present for this hour and sharing your music and your own insights. Thank you to Andrea, dear friend, and someone who just does, along with her husband Glenn, so much good in the world. And this series would not have been possible without you. Deeply appreciated. Andrea, anything you want to say before we sign off? Give you a, there you
Nope.
go.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kevin. You are wise beyond your years. And I thank you for your vulnerability and your openness. I did want to share, I realized I forgot to share that Kevin also has many degrees and graduate degrees to his name. He was a Trojan undergrad at USC and has graduate degrees in business and social work. So he does have a lot of expertise behind him as well. So,
And the name of your podcast is?
And the name of the podcast is Getting Through.
With Bradley Sonnenberg.
Yep, and we're getting through. We're getting ready to launch our second season, probably middle to end of not middle of February, end of February, beginning of March. So join us for the second season.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Have a good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, bye.